Aurelon 7 basked in the soft glow of its twin suns, a verdant jewel in a sea of stars. Rolling plains of purple grass stretched for miles, interspersed with crystalline lakes and towering, spindly trees that shimmered with iridescent light. The colony was a testament to the Galactic Concord's vision of peaceful coexistence, where species of all kinds worked together to forge a utopian future. At least, that was the idea. Commander Alex Pierce squinted at the holographic interface floating before him. The report scrolling across it painted a different picture. One of gaps in security protocols, insufficient resources allocated to defense, and what he could only describe as a galactic-level underestimation of Murphy's Law. "Let me get this straight," Pierce said, turning to face the alien liaison officer beside him. "You're saying that this colony's entire defense system relies on a single orbital platform and... what was it called again?" Real Zithrax's translucent skin flushed a pale lavender, a sign of mild irritation in her species. Her delicate insect-like features twitched as she replied, "The harmonization beacon. It projects a field of calming frequencies to deter hostile intent." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me that you think bad guys are just going to stop being bad because they're... calm?" "It has been highly effective," Ryle said defensively. "The last recorded conflict on Aurelon 7 occurred over 3 centuries ago." Pierce's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Right. And you've never had a problem since?" "Precisely." Pierce crossed his arms and leaned back against the railing of the observation deck, letting his gaze sweep over the sprawling colony below. Sleek buildings of alien design dotted the landscape, their surfaces shimmering like liquid silver. Hundreds of species moved about. Some floated, others scuttled, and a few walked upright like humans. It was a picture-perfect paradise, utterly unprepared for the storm on the horizon. "Look, I get it," Pierce said, his tone softening slightly. "Peaceful coexistence and all that. But out in the galaxy, there are things that don't care how calm or harmonious you are. They'll just see a soft target." Ryle's antennae quivered. "And you believe humanity's unique approach to security is preferable?" "I'm saying that putting all your eggs in one basket is a bad idea," Pierce replied, "which is why I've been installing some additional measures." Ryle's eyes widened. "Additional measures? You were authorized to assist, not to overstep your mandate. What measures are you referring to?" Pierce's grin was anything but reassuring. "Oh, you'll see." The first sign of trouble came a week later. The Zarkon Horde, a species thought to be extinct, emerged from the shadowy depths of uncharted space, sweeping through isolated systems like a wildfire. Their fleets, bristling with jagged weaponry and surrounded by a haze of electromagnetic distortion, struck fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned commanders. Aurelon 7 was next on their list. Pierce stood in the command center as the first reports of the incoming fleet arrived. Around him, alien officers scrambled, their voices chittering, clicking, and buzzing in a cacophony of panic. Ryle Zithrax hovered nearby, her usually serene demeanor cracking under the weight of the situation. "They've bypassed the outer colonies," she said, her voice trembling. "Aurelon 7 is directly in their path." Pierce's expression hardened. "Time to put those additional measures to work." "What measures?" Ryle demanded, but Pierce was already issuing commands. "Activate Protocol Alpha 9, he barked into his communicator. A moment later, the colony's serene skyline transformed. Panels on the sides of buildings slid open, revealing concealed turrets and missile launchers. Orbital platforms previously thought to be scientific research stations reconfigured into massive railgun arrays. Swarms of drones emerged from underground silos, their sleek forms cutting through the air like a flock of predatory birds. Ryle stared, her antennae drooping in shock. "What is all this?" "Insurance," Pierce replied. "You'll thank me later." Above the planet, the Zarkon fleet emerged from hyperspace. Their jagged ships loomed like predatory beasts, their weapons charging with ominous energy. But before they could fire a single shot, humanity's overkill began. Orbital mines detonated, creating a chain reaction that tore through the vanguard of the Zarkon fleet. Railguns fired projectiles at near-light speeds, punching through shields and hulls with terrifying precision. Swarms of drones descended on the invaders, their coordinated attacks overwhelming even the most advanced Zarkon systems. In the command center, Ryle could only watch in stunned silence as the Zarkon fleet was systematically dismantled. This is madness, she whispered. You've turned a peaceful colony into a fortress. Pierce didn't take his eyes off the holographic display. Madness? Number, this is what we call being prepared. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Despite their overwhelming losses, the Zarkons were not a species known for retreat. Their armada regrouped just beyond Orlan 7's defensive perimeter. Through the long-range sensors, Pierce could see the chaotic movements of their ships, evidence of desperation and fury. They're planning something big, Pierce muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. What more could they possibly do? Ryle asked, her voice teetering between disbelief and dread. Your defenses have already devastated their fleet. Pierce tapped a few commands into the console, pulling up a detailed analysis of the Zarkon's remaining forces. They've got one last card to play. If I were them, I'd hit us with everything at once. A full-scale assault to overwhelm the defenses. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the command center. The AI voice of the colony's defense system announced, "Incoming hyperspace signatures detected. Multiple capital-class vessels approaching at high velocity." Pierce's jaw tightened. Looks like I was right. Ryle's antennae twitched anxiously. Surely they're not foolish enough to think brute force will work. Pierce's gaze darkened. They're not fools. They're desperate. That makes them even more dangerous. The Zarkon's reinforcements emerged from hyperspace with a ferocity that dwarfed their initial assault. Colossal ships bristling with weaponry surged forward, flanked by smaller, faster vessels designed for surgical strikes. At the center of the formation was a behemoth, a dreadnought brimming with energy signatures that made Pierce's blood run cold. "That's a planet killer," he said grimly. "If they fire that thing, Orlan 7 is done." Ryle's face paled. "Do we have anything that can stop it?" Pierce's fingers danced across the console. "We've got more than just anything. Let's show them what Protocol Beta 12 looks like." Moments later, the stealth fleet humanity had hidden in the outer reaches of the system came online. Invisible to the Zarkon sensors, these ships had been lying in wait for a moment just like this. As the Zarkon dreadnought charged its weapon, the stealth fleet struck. High-powered missiles streaked through space, slamming into the dreadnought's hull with pinpoint accuracy. Advanced railgun platforms unleashed a barrage of fire, focusing on the dreadnought's critical systems. The Zarkons, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but the damage was already done. The dreadnought's energy core destabilized, triggering a chain reaction that tore the massive ship apart in a blinding explosion. The remaining Zarkon forces faltered, their formation collapsing as panic set in. Humanity's overkill had once again turned the tide. In the aftermath of the battle, Rill stood beside Pierce on the observation deck, watching as drones began the task of repairing the colony's minimal damage. For the first time, she seemed at a loss for words. "You were right," she finally said. "About everything." Pierce gave a small, tired smile. "It's not about being right. It's about making sure people survive to argue with me later." Rill tilted her head, her antennae twitching in what might have been amusement. "You humans are unique." Pierce chuckled. "You don't know the half of it." The aftermath of the Zarkon attack rippled across the galaxy. News of humanity's unprecedented defensive measures spread faster than light, sparking debate within the Galactic Concord. Orlan 7's survival was hailed as a miracle by some, and a cautionary tale by others. Within the hallowed chambers of the Concord Council, an emergency session was called. Delegates from hundreds of species filled the vast, dome-shaped hall, their voices blending into a chaotic hum. At the center stood Ryle Zethrax, her usual poise replaced with a steely determination. "We must address the actions of humanity," she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "While their intervention saved Aurelon 7, it also raises serious concerns about the militarization of Concord territories." Murmurs of agreement spread through the assembly. Pierce, standing off to the side as humanity's representative, remained silent. He knew this was coming. Humanity's methods were always polarizing, and this time they had played their hand in the most public way possible. A sleek, reptilian delegate hissed in disdain. "They turned a peaceful colony into a war zone. Is this what we want for the future of the Concord?" Ryle raised a hand, silencing the growing dissent. And yet, without their actions, Aurelon 7 would have been reduced to ash. Their overkill, as some call it, ensured the survival of millions. Pierce finally stepped forward. His voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "You all talk about peace like it's a default state of the universe. It's not. Peace is something you have to fight for, something you have to protect. Humanity's history taught us that lesson the hard way. And whether you like it or not, it's a lesson you need to learn too." The chamber fell silent. Pierce let his words hang in the air before continuing. "We didn't ask for the Zarkons to show up, but when they did, we were ready. If you want to criticize us for that, fine. But don't pretend that sticking your heads in the sand will keep you safe." Ryle turned to the assembly. "Perhaps the question isn't whether humanity's methods are extreme, but whether we are willing to adapt. The galaxy is changing. The Concord must change with it." Back on Aurelon 7, the colony was already rebuilding. Despite the destruction, the community's spirit remained unbroken. Children played in the fields, their laughter echoing across the plains, while adults worked side by side, repairing what had been lost. Pierce watched from a distance, a rare moment of quiet settling over him. Ryle approached, her usual formal demeanor softened. "The council will deliberate for weeks, perhaps months," she said. "But I suspect your actions will have lasting consequences." Pierce smirked. "Good or bad?" "Both, I imagine." He nodded, his gaze drifting back to the colony. "As long as they're ready for what's out there, I can live with that." Ryle studied him for a moment. "Do you ever tire of carrying the weight of your species' reputation?" Pierce laughed, a low, genuine sound. "All the time, but someone's got to do it." Ryle's antennae twitched in what might have been a smile. "Then let us hope your example inspires more than just fear." Pierce turned to her, his expression serious. "Fear's not the goal. Survival is." The twin suns of Aurelon 7 dipped below the horizon, casting the colony in a golden glow. For now, at least, peace had been won, through humanity's relentless, unyielding determination to protect what mattered most. The defeat of the Zarkons was nothing short of a galactic spectacle. Recorded across multiple wavelengths and shared through every conceivable medium, the battle at Aurelon 7 became a defining moment in Galactic Concord history. On Concord Prime, the capital station of the Alliance, the council chambers buzzed with animated discussions. Representatives from hundreds of species watched and re-watched the footage, from the stealth fleet's surgical strikes to the planet's automated defenses springing to life. The humans' approach to security was the center of debate. "They've jeopardized the very spirit of the Concord," roared a delegate from the Oslan Union, her gelatinous form rippling with outrage. "This display of force will only invite more conflict." A stocky, crystalline envoy from the Gorath Consortium countered, his voice deep and resonant. "And yet, it is because of their preparations that Aurelon 7 remains standing. Would you prefer the alternative, an annihilated colony?" At the center of the chamber, real Zithrax stood silent, her translucent skin glowing faintly as she absorbed the exchange. Her mind replayed the battle over and over. Humanity's methods were undeniably effective, but their implications unnerving. The voice of the Concord chair, a towering, multi-limbed being with eyes that seemed to pierce through dimensions, brought the room to order. We must deliberate on the broader implications of this event. Humanity has shown us a path of survival, but at what cost to our principles? Meanwhile, on Aurelin 7, life continued amidst the wreckage. Pierce walked through the colony, observing as various species worked together to rebuild. The scars of the battle were evident but shallow, testaments to the defenses he'd insisted on installing. A group of alien children ran past, laughing as they chased one of the defense drones. The sight brought a rare smile to his face. "Commander!" a voice called, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to see Ryle approaching. Her usual calm demeanor softened. "Ryle?" he greeted her. "Here to argue some more about humanity's overkill?" She tilted her head. "I've decided I've had my fill of arguments for now. I wanted to thank you." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Thank me? Didn't see that coming." Ryle's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. "Without your measures, Aurelin 7 would be a graveyard. That much is undeniable. But it does leave me with questions." "Questions about what?" She gestured toward the horizon, where the colony's defenses were still visible. Hulking turrets and shimmering shield generators, casting long shadows in the fading light. Is this the only way? Must we always prepare for war to preserve peace? Pierce sighed, looking out at the same horizon. I wish it wasn't. But out there, he pointed toward the stars. There's always someone who doesn't play by the rules. And when they show up, you'd better be ready to hit harder than they can. Ryle studied him for a moment before nodding. Perhaps the Concord has more to learn from humanity than I realized. Pierce smirked. You'll get there. One day. In the depths of uncharted space, the remnants of the Zarkon fleet limped back to their hidden stronghold. Their leaders, battered and enraged, convened in secret. The destruction of their dreadnought and the decimation of their forces had not broken them. It had only hardened their resolve. The Zarkon warlord, a towering figure of muscle and steel, slammed a fist onto the console before him. These humans, they've shown us their strength. Now we must show them ours. Another commander, smaller but no less menacing, hissed. Their tactics were unexpected, but we can adapt. We always do. The warlord's eyes gleamed with malice. Let the galaxy believe humanity is invincible. We will find their weaknesses, and when we strike again, it will not be with brute force. It will be with precision. The room filled with the guttural growls of Zarkon warriors swearing vengeance. Back on Aurelin 7, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Pierce stood alone, gazing at the stars. Somewhere out there, he knew, the Zarkons were plotting their next move. But he also knew humanity would be ready, because that's what humanity did. Prepared for the worst, hoping for the best, and always ready to overkill. The remnants of the Zarkon fleet regrouped in the outer reaches of the system, their desperation palpable. Although their numbers had been decimated, their will to conquer had not wavered. Among the survivors, the command of the fleet had fallen to Captain Vrakur, a cunning strategist who had clawed his way up the ranks of Zarkon society through ruthless efficiency. Human ingenuity has proven unexpected. Vrakur growled to his officers aboard the command ship, Eviscerator. But their reliance on brute force leaves them vulnerable. We will exploit their arrogance. Vrakur's plan was bold. A diversionary attack would draw the colony's defenses to one side of the planet, leaving the other exposed. A small strike team would infiltrate the colony's command center, disable its core systems, and pave the way for a final bombardment. In the colony's command center, Pierce watched the scattered Zarkon ships with narrowed eyes. Something felt off. Their movements lacked the chaos of a retreat. They were too coordinated, too deliberate. "They're up to something," he muttered. Ryle, standing beside him, frowned. "What do you mean?" "Their forces are in disarray." Pierce shook his head. "Number, they're regrouping for a tactical maneuver. I've seen this before. Feint and strike. They're hoping we'll take the bait." Ryle's antennae twitched. "Then what do we do?" Pierce's lips curled into a grim smile. "We let them think they've succeeded." When the Zarkons launched their diversionary attack, the colony's defenses reacted as expected. Railguns pivoted, drones swarmed, and the outer defenses lit up the void with bursts of plasma fire. But the true strength of humanity's protection protocols lay in their redundancy. As the Zarkon's strike team approached the colony's surface in cloaked shuttles, they failed to notice the microdrones tracking their every move. By the time they breached the outer perimeter of the command center, automated defenses were already locking onto them. The infiltration team barely had time to react as the hallway filled with the hum of energy turrets and the whirring of combat bots. Within minutes, the Zarkons were neutralized. Meanwhile, in orbit, the real battle unfolded. Vraka's eviscerator led the remaining ships in a desperate push, their weapons blazing in a final attempt to overwhelm the colony's defenses. "Deploy the ArcNet," Pierce commanded. From the orbital platforms, a web of high-energy beams activated, enveloping the colony in a lattice of shimmering light. The Zarkon ships that attempted to breach it were shredded by the concentrated energy. Realizing the futility of his assault, Vraka snarled. "If we cannot conquer, we will destroy." The eviscerator's core began to overload, the ship transforming into a colossal bomb. Pierce's eyes widened as the sensors detected the buildup of energy. "They're going to self-destruct and take us with them." "Can we stop it?" Ryle asked, panic creeping into her voice. Pierce's fingers flew across the console. "Not stop it, but we can contain it. Redirect all power to the orbital sync array." The colony's orbital platforms shifted, focusing their energy beams onto the eviscerator. The concentrated assault destabilized the ship's core prematurely, forcing it to detonate far from the planet's surface. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun, but the colony remained untouched. Epilogue. Lessons learned. As the last remnants of the Zarkon fleet vanished into the void, Pierce stood on the observation deck, surveying the aftermath. The colony had survived, but the cost was evident in the shaken faces of its inhabitants. "You were right," Ryle said softly. "Your protocols saved us." Pierce nodded, though his expression was far from triumphant. "It's not about being right. It's about being ready for the worst." Ryle tilted her head. "And yet, you've taught us more than just preparedness. You've shown us that survival sometimes requires overkill." Pierce chuckled. "When it comes to protecting what matters, there's no such thing as overkill." As the twin suns set over Orelon 7, casting the landscape in hues of gold and violet, the colony stood as a symbol of resilience, and humanity's reputation among the stars grew. Unpredictable, unstoppable, and utterly prepared for anything.